I'm called Suzy Willson. I'm the co-artistic director of Clod Ensemble, which is a performance company based in London.
What inspired yourself and Paul Clark to produce Clod Ensemble over 2 decades ago?
I've known Paul since I was 12, and he was always really into music, and I was into drama. And when we grew up in the 80s, there was a lot of arts kind of provision in schools and in the local area, which we were very lucky to be able to participate in. And then when I went to university in Manchester, I saw a show by a Russian theatre company, which was based on a Pushkin short play called The Feast During the Plague. And Paul and I decided to make our first piece based on that play in 1996.
Sounds great. So how does Placebo differ to Clod Ensemble's other works?
All of our work, there's a meeting place between form and content. So, for example, when we did a show called An Anatomy, which was about the history of anatomy and how we look at the human body, we dissected the Lowry Theatre here and the audience moved through the space. So Placebo has got a similar meeting place between form and content, and the structure is a series of experiments that take place. So the whole theatre becomes an observation room, if you like. I think what's different about this performance is we're working with young fashion designers called Art School, one of whom, Tom Barrett, was brought up in Stockport. And they bring this extraordinary kind of visual look to the show, and all the costumes have been designed by them especially, which is really exciting. And also it's the first piece that we've just worked with dancers. Usually we have a mix of actors and dancers, and in this piece there's 7 dancers. But I'd say it's not just for a dance audience, it's still pretty theatrical. So hopefully people who are into theatre and dance will come along to see it.
That's great. So more of a fun question. Could you describe Placebo for us using 5 words?
Yes, because I think it is thought-provoking.
Yeah.
It is colourful, visually stunning.
Yeah.
Empowering, and energetic.
Yeah. Right. And can you elaborate on what the concept is behind the play?
So in medical trials, the effectiveness of a drug is tested against a placebo pill, which is inactive, so effectively a sugar pill. But often in these trials, the placebo pill actually shows an improvement in health. So I've always been interested in medicine, and I think this placebo response for me really shows how important other factors are in the healing process. So things like what expectations do people bring to a medical encounter? How important is it that they trust the doctor? What kind of conditioning have they had in their lives to make them believe that something is going to be more effective? Also things like colour, how important colour is. So apparently red pills are more effective than blue pills, for example. So I suppose placebo response points to an extraordinary ability of human beings to make themselves not only feel better but become better, because they produce incredible chemicals in their brain to improve their health. So those are the ideas. But effectively, placebo is just a great, hopefully, a great experience, a great night out. So it doesn't matter if people don't know anything about placebo response before they come. It's not just for people who are interested in science. It's a dance piece, really.
So what response have you received from media companies and the public regarding the play and the concept behind it?
Well, we haven't done it yet. So this week is our opening night. We open here at the Lowry. So that's exciting. I think when we talk about it, people are genuinely fascinated by the subject matter and intrigued about how we might make a show using that as a point of departure.
Yeah, I think the trailers kind of brought it across to be really exciting as well. Where else will it be exhibited, as well as the Lowry?
We're touring to the Attenborough Centre in Brighton, which is part of the University of Sussex. We're also going to Preston. And then we go to London and perform for 10 days at the Place.
So how do you start creating your works? Like, what is the starting process for you?
Depends on the piece. Sometimes we start with a piece of music, sometimes we start with a painting, and sometimes we start with a story. And for this piece, we've started with the subject matter. So often in our often our pieces are a kind of process of investigation of a theme. We kind of think of the subject matter as a point of departure, and then we take some ideas into the studio and start working with dancers, or performers. So I'd say our process, me and Paul writes all the music, and he's the other artistic director, work very closely together on the initial idea. Then we go into the rehearsal room, ask the dancers to improvise from those ideas, and then we'll go back and Paul will write some music, and then we'll take that back into the studio. So often our performances are created over quite a long time, like a couple of years. Because the music is so closely written to the movement, it takes quite a long time to develop the score. In a way, we think of the score, the musical score, a bit like the script or the thing that drives the structure of the show.
Yeah, so it's always different then, the process.
Yeah.
In today's age where the world is surrounded by technology and social networking, why do you think that theatre is still so important?
I think for me personally, I didn't grow up with social media and technology, but now I find it brilliant on the one hand, but often it's kind of so fragmentary that I can feel quite distracted. So there's something for me that's very liberating about going into a space like a theatre, putting all that aside and just being really able to concentrate and focus. I'm really interested in presence, of people being present, and there's something very powerful when a group of people in the same room are present. And this is interesting actually in relation to the theme of the show, placebo response, because there's been some research done recently in looking at theatre audiences which suggests that after a certain amount of time everybody's hearts start beating together. So there is something very kind of primeval, I think, very basic about human beings' need to connect, and I think a theatre space is a very beautiful space to do that in.
That's really interesting what you said about the research. I didn't know that. So can you tell us about your training with the legendary theatre and movement teacher Jacques Lecoq in Paris?
So my experience of studying with Lecoq was completely life-changing. I'd come from Manchester University, as I said, which was a very academic course, very much about being clever with your brain and not a lot of physical, practical work. So for me, spending a year in France, just really learning how to be more articulate with my body was really good. So thinking about, the power of the human body to speak beyond words, and actually the way we communicate as human beings is primarily non-verbal. So it's kind of extraordinary that we don't learn more about non-verbal communication when we're children. And I think also when I studied with Lecoq, I don't know if you've seen the Cinderella Disney film, where all the objects and everything in the house suddenly come to life and become animated. And I think for me, studying with Lecoq was like that, because his idea was that everything moves. So you can find a movement dynamic in everything. How do the leaves on the trees move? How does a sunset move? How does fire move? So all the world becomes animated, and that for me again was very liberating to think in terms of movement and how powerful a language that is in terms then of drama. That if I put the fire into my body, then I might play a scene about anger, or if I physicalize a sun setting, what does that do to my physicality? It might be a scene about someone leaving that you love. So it's a kind of a non-psychological way of looking at acting, if you like, which I think often allows more room for the audience to decide, to interpret whether they think something is moving or enraging or sad. It gives them a lot of space.
Yeah, for them to be able to think for it themselves as well.
Yeah.
So how has the performing medicine programme been involved?
So in parallel with our performance programme at Clod Ensemble, we run a project called Performing Medicine, which is a project which uses arts-based methods to train healthcare professionals. So we work with a range of associate artists, most of whom have got some background in participatory arts, who go into hospitals and medical schools and help healthcare professionals and medical students develop skills such as non-verbal communication, spatial awareness, language skills, vocal skills, teamwork, leadership. So all of these things that traditionally arts has been very good at, and so we go into the hospitals and it's a very different kind of education from what they're used to, but it's been very successful, and again because it's so practical and embodied, people get a chance to practice.
It's so unique, isn't it, which works. So we're celebrating 70 years of the NHS this year. Do you think that training medical staff in such a way that Clod Ensemble do is something that other places should think about doing as well?
I think there's huge potential for arts work, for the arts and arts organisations to become involved in the health and well-being of our communities. There's been recently a report by the All-Party Parliamentary Group about how creative arts can help the well-being of our communities. That might be about encouraging people with long-term conditions to go and join a choir, or it might be about using the arts to train healthcare professionals. I think there's so much potential, there's some brilliant projects, and if anyone's interested in this area, I really recommend them looking up this report so they'll see the breadth of work happening in this area. I think it will continue to develop, and what we need now is to train a new generation of artists to be able to work in those settings.